Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. Let's start today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, today I have chosen 8 important topics and we shall analyze all of them comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the paper again. But before we start, I have a very important announcement. In the recent UPSC CSE results, Unacademy learners have performed spectacularly well. More than 109 candidates have been selected in the top list, and they are from the Unacademy paid classroom program, including All India Rank 1 Anuj Agnihotri. Many more students had enrolled in our free special classes on the Unacademy platform, and few others had even taken up the mock interview under the interview guidance program. So, to celebrate this tremendous success of our students, Unacademy is presenting the Manzil offer so that those of you who are looking to enroll for classes for 2027 and beyond, you can avail this special price to join our IAS courses. The subscription is available at a 60% off at just 16,999. You will also get access to double validity. That is, if you take a 6-month subscription, you will get a 6-month free extension. The same applies for 12 and 18-month subscription as well. And if you avail a subscription of more than 18 months, you will also get CSE Assure. Under CSE Assure, let's say for some reason you don't clear the exam in your first attempt, then the next attempt is entirely on us. So if you want to enroll immediately, please check out the link provided in the video description for further details. I'm told this offer will end on the 17th of March. So those interested, please make use of it immediately. And when you click on the link, you might find a different price on the subscription page. So to avail the offer, you have to enter the code IAS English. So with this, let's begin with today's discussion. And these are the topics that we have chosen for today's analysis. There are around 15 to 16 articles in total. And this can be clubbed under around 8 topics. So that is what we are going to take up for discussion today. On page number 12, we'll start with this important column that focuses on the Supreme Court's ruling related to the creamy layer concept for OBC reservation. So on the 11th of March, the Supreme Court has passed an important order with regard to how creamy layer is identified to apply OBC reservation. This is a topic we had briefly discussed in one of our recent sessions. So today we have an opportunity to dive deep into the topic, go beyond the article, and understand the importance of the Supreme Court ruling. See, a case had been filed at the Supreme Court by a bunch of civil service toppers, especially those who cleared the UPSC civil services exam after 2015. A bunch of candidates, around 100 plus toppers, they had approached the Supreme Court of India alleging that the improper application of the creamy layer concept and the confusion surrounding the income criteria or the wealth test had deprived them of the deserving seats according to their ranks. And these students had collectively approached the Supreme Court for relief to provide for clarity on the definition of creamy layer concept. Now, this is where we need to understand what is creamy layer concept, when was it introduced, how does the government define it, what were the criteria used to identify the income and the wealth of a family when a particular candidate from the family is applying for OBC reservation. What was the prevailing confusion over here? This confusion has lasted for many, many years, affecting several candidates across the country. So now the Supreme Court, which has intervened, has tried to provide some clarity in this regard to ensure the fair application of the creamy layer concept. So this is a big boost for the proper implementation of OBC reservation. Now, when you look at OBC reservation in the country, it goes back to the Mandal era politics of 1980s. The Mandal Commission, which had recommended reservation for OBC category, other backward classes. It was designed to provide for socio-economic upliftment of the marginalized sections of the Indian society. While the Indian Constitution had contemplated reservation only for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, etc., OBC reservation was added much later based on the recommendations of the Mandal Committee. The implementation of OBC reservation even triggered a lot of protests in the 1980s, but eventually the government was able to push ahead and provide for the implementation of OBC reservation. So, approximately around 27% of the seats in education and government jobs are reserved for various OBC communities. Now, applying this reservation and ensuring that the privileged classes within the OBCs don't reap the benefits out of it was one of the big challenges that was present in the 1990s. So in 1992, through the Indira Savni judgment, the Supreme Court of India, which was looking at the constitutionality of OBC reservation, it upheld the constitutional validity, but it placed few restrictions. It placed the famous 50% cap, ensuring that general category students are not disadvantaged by the policy of affirmative action, which was equally important to uplift the backward and marginalized sections of the Indian society. So the 50% cap was introduced so that reservation remains capped under 50%, with remaining seats being available for merit-based allotment. So in this judgment, to ensure that only the deserving candidates avail of the OBC reservation, the Supreme Court laid down the concept of creamy layer. That is, those families which have already seen social upliftment because of their jobs, because of their social profile, they need not be provided with reservation again. Reservation should be limited only to the truly underprivileged and the marginalized sections. So, under the creamy layer concept, the Supreme Court had outlined as to how the privileged sections within OBCs can be kept out, and it had left the finer details to the government to be defined. So, the DOPT, the Department of Personnel and Training, under the Ministry of Personnel, brought out a set of rules and created a charter to identify the creamy layer within the OBC category. This set of rules, it was notified in 1993 through a office memorandum or OM issued by the DOPT. Now, under this office memorandum, if you look at the fine print, it has clearly marked out as to which specific families fall under the category of creamy layer. Now, for example, children of those parents who are holding constitutional high offices, like the children of the President of India or the children of governor of a state. So those who hold constitutional positions already, they have seen social mobility. They have basically risen up the social ladder, overcoming the obstacles of India's caste-based oppressive discriminatory system. So those who hold constitutional high offices, their children will not be eligible for reservation under OBC category. They fall under the creamy layer bracket. This includes judges of the higher judiciary as well, judges of High Court and Supreme Court. It includes senior government officials who are directly recruited into government services under Class 1, Class 2 category, Group A civil service officers at the state and central level. So they are all brought under the creamy layer definition. Then even children of officers from the armed forces and paramilitary forces above a certain rank, even they are excluded. So this is largely based on the role or the nature of job or work performed by the parents of these candidates. So if they already have a privileged position within the government, if they are already high-ranking officials, high-ranking judges, or those who hold constitutional high offices, they automatically fall under the creamy layer bracket, irrespective of which category they belong to. Their children cannot avail OBC reservation. So there is no confusion in this regard. The confusion over interpretation of creamy layer applies for one specific category. That is exactly what the Supreme Court has now dealt with. See, the DOPT introduced the income and wealth test concept to identify and apply the creamy layer concept. It was much easier to identify creamy layer based on constitutional posts and government jobs. But with income and wealth as a criteria, how to define who falls under the creamy layer bracket? This was a challenge for DOPT. So, under the 1993 Office Memorandum, the DOPT applied this income test and the wealth test. So, essentially, those who engage in salaried professions, those who engage in business and trade, those who hold land, plantations, buildings, plots, especially in certain urban areas, and even the parents who are in central PSUs and state public sector units, their children fall under the creamy layer depending on the income or wealth test. So you can treat this as the second category. First category is about government positions, high offices, etc., where the definition is very, very clear. But income wealth test primarily applies for this second category, which I am pointing out, which is the salaried class, those involved in trade and business profession, those who hold land and property. So for them, identifying the income level of the family, the wealth of the family was important, and using a threshold so that those who are above this threshold, they can be left out from the reservation. They can be placed under the creamy layer. So under the 1993 Office Memorandum, the DOPT set 1 lakh rupees per annum as the income threshold. But in this income, salary cannot be considered. Salary and even the money generated by the parents through their profession can't be considered as a part of the income threshold. In fact, for this wealth test, it's only capital gains, any additional revenue coming from property which is owned by the parents, or any profits made additionally through business ventures. This is what is basically calculated as per the 1993 Office Memorandum, which means the salaries of parents should not be considered as per the 1993 Office Memorandum. Now, when you look at central PSUs and state PSUs, their children were supposed to be placed under the creamy layer bracket, meaning they should not avail OBC reservation. But to implement this, the DOPT had to identify the equivalence of the posts held by the parents in comparison with central government jobs and state government jobs. But this was never done by the government. Now let's take a central PSU like BEL or BHEL. So those who are employed in these central PSUs or state-owned public sector units above a certain rank, right, they can be excluded by placing them under the creamy layer. But drawing the equivalence between their title, their rank with the matching government jobs in central and state government, this equivalence was never drawn by the government. Even now, that equivalence in ranks and position has not been identified by the government. So in the old memorandum of 1993, there was no clarity that was provided. 1 lakh was set as the income threshold, which has been revised and updated regularly. And under this income threshold or wealth test, salary was not to be considered. Depending on parental income alone, you can't determine whether that particular candidate should be placed under the creamy layer. Right? The rules were very clear in this regard. So over the years, this income threshold has increased. Right? It has reached 8 lakh rupees as of 2017. That was the last revision that was done by DOPT. Now, this is based on parental income of last 3 consecutive years. So if parental income was above this threshold, they would get placed under creamy layer. But this was seen as unfair for employees in central public sector units and state public sector units. It was seen as unfair for salaried class in the private sector. It was seen as unfair for those engaged in business and trade or those holding property and land. Because OBC reservation was about social and economic upliftment. It's not just based on the income criteria. Income criteria is an additional test to determine the overall wealth of the family, which is apart from the salary or the income that the parents are generating. So that's why the 1993 memorandum was clear that any additional income which is coming in, if they own additional property, if they have any additional business ventures, and if they are earning wealth through capital gains, only this would be considered for the income criteria. The monthly salary will not be considered. The basic income parents are earning through a business will not be considered. But later on, the DOPT came out with another memorandum with an updated correction. A new memorandum was issued in 2004, which became the source of all the confusion. The 2004 Office Memorandum, which basically made changes to the income test and the wealth test, is the primary source of confusion. So, under this new memorandum, the DOPT has stated that parents' salary will be considered. While the 1993 memorandum had stated that parental income would not be the sole criteria, there are different thresholds that are considered. In 2004, this was updated and revised, where it stated that the salary of the parents would be considered as well. Now, this would unfairly hit the employees in central and state PSUs because, as I said, their equivalence in ranks and position with central government jobs and state government jobs has not been created, it has not been identified. Now, when you look at government jobs, class 1, class 2 officers, that is group A officers, it's clearly identified. Only those holding those posts, their children will not get reservation, they'll fall under creamy layer. But this clear distinction, drawing equivalence between those posts and PSUs with central and state government jobs was never done. So when the government introduced salary and parental income as a criteria, which would be measured as part of this threshold, 8 lakh rupees per annum threshold, this was seen as an unfair application because within the OBC category, within the same community, different set of criteria and rules would apply for candidates. So this is the equivalent of treating equals as unequals. It goes against the very idea of equality, which is the cornerstone of India's constitutional republic. Treating equals as unequals is allowed only when there is a proper justification for it. When you look at Article 15 and 16, which provides for affirmative action, which provides for reservation, this is an exception which is made where equals can be treated as unequals provided if the state can prove that they are disadvantaged, if they are socially disadvantaged, educationally or economically disadvantaged. So treating the same category of people as different entities depending on parental income alone and a different set of criteria for each individual creates an unfairness that goes against the principle of equality and right to equality, which is guaranteed under Article 14 of the Indian Constitution. This was the argument of the civil services toppers from 2015 onwards, that despite getting good ranks, they were not getting the right services because they would fall under the creamy layer bracket, especially children of employees in central PSUs and state PSUs. At least 100 such toppers are present in the last decade, and they were fighting this particular case. So now the Supreme Court, which has stepped in, it has clearly pointed out that parental income alone cannot be the criteria. When the equivalence of the ranks of central state PSUs has not been identified with central state government jobs, government cannot consider parental salary and place all those candidates under creamy layer bracket. This would amount to treating equals as unequals, as different criteria are being applied within the OBC category to determine the income or the wealth of the particular family. So on these grounds, the Supreme Court has basically said that creamy layer cannot be applied in this manner anymore, which clears a lot of confusion, and it is going to benefit the civil services toppers post 2015 who cleared the exam from the OBC category and still did not get the preferred cadres and postings. So there will be subsequent changes which will happen, and this is going to benefit the next generation of candidates as well. Those who would have otherwise been placed on a creamy layer category, thus being deprived of the reservation that they deserve, that would now get reversed because of the Supreme Court's intervention. It finally ends the long prevailing confusion on how the income test, the wealth test should apply for OBC candidates. So please take up this practice question based on what we have discussed. So, long story short, this ruling of the Supreme Court provides relief for children of central and state PSUs. It is this category that will primarily benefit because parental salary was being considered, and automatically all those candidates, they would fall under creamy layer bracket because their parents would be earning more than 8 lakh rupees per annum. So with the exclusion of this, it will ensure that more and more candidates from this category, they'll have more clarity to claim the reservation which is accorded to them. So please take up this practice question. Now let's move to the next topic. Over the past 10 days, we have been talking about the energy crisis that India is dealing with, particularly the gas shortage, the shortage of LPG and LNG supplies, which is taking a critical hit at the Indian economy. So in this context, India has invoked an emergency provision, the Essential Commodities Act 1955. So today we have an article that helps us further understand the details, the finer details of Essential Commodities Act. So let's quickly break down this topic. Let's understand what is the Essential Commodities Act? What kind of special powers does the government acquire when this act is invoked? What's the purpose of this legislation? How is it used? When has it been used? How will it help India overcome the gas shortage that we are facing today? These are the key details we can take away from this particular article. The Essential Commodities Act 1955 is an extraordinary piece of legislation because it gives extraordinary powers to the central government. Almost sort of an emergency type of provisions are accorded to the central government to manage the supply of commodities in the market. As the name itself tells you, the purpose is to empower the central government, the government of India, to play a direct role in the market, to control the supply, the storage, the transportation, the distribution, and the production of certain critical commodities, essential commodities, when there is a major shortage in the market. So it mainly allows the government of India to intervene in the markets during a contingency. That's why it's often referred to as a emergency sort of power, emergency type of provision that's available to the government of India. So this allows the center to even override the states, even though they might have jurisdiction. And the central government can issue extraordinary orders to the industry, to factories, to suppliers and distributors, and gain full control over the supply chain of these essential commodities. So, for example, essential commodities such as drugs, fertilizers, which is critical for agriculture, various food commodities from wheat, sugar, rice, pulses, etc., edible oils, which is used in cooking, then fuel that includes petrol, diesel, gas, etc., and also seeds. So these commodities are the backbone of your economy, your agrarian economy, your industrial and service based economy. Without these basic commodities, your economy cannot function. So if there is a critical shortage in their supply due to a supply side shock, then government can invoke this extraordinary power, and under section 3 of this act, the central government acquires this tremendous power to control the entire supply chain. Though India follows a largely free market model, this allows for direct state intervention in the market and gain complete end-to-end control, right from raw material to production to sale and distribution. The entire supply chain can come under the government's control when Section 3 of Essential Commodities Act is invoked. Through this, the government can either order the industry to maintain the existing level of supplies or increase the supply to deal with the contingency. So government can direct the production level. The government can order both public sector and private sector companies and industries to step up their production and prioritize the allocation of the resource for specific entities and sectors in the economy. The entire storage, transportation, sale, and distribution of these essential commodities will come under complete government control. The government can even fix the prices to prevent any unnecessary inflation or price hikes by sellers, which is quite common whenever there is a shortage in essential commodities. So, this will help protect the consumers and also protect the macroeconomic indicators of the economy, mainly to deal with sudden runaway inflation, which can get triggered when there is a sudden supply shock. So, government can control and fix the prices, control production, issue orders to public and private sector entities to maintain or increase the supplies. It can even determine the storage, transportation, and distribution and allocation of the commodities for specific entities and sectors in the Indian economy. It can even prescribe stock limits, to what extent the commodity can be stocked up in warehouses and in storage. It can also bring in measures, extraordinary measures can be brought in, including criminal provisions to deal with black marketing and hoarding. Because whenever there is a shortage of essential commodity, it's very common to see hoarding of that product and selling of the product in the black market, where the product is sold at much, much higher prices than the market price. So the government will gain extraordinary powers and control over here to deal with hoarding and black marketing. And it can even invoke criminal provisions against those who violate these orders of the government. The last time we saw the major usage of Essential Commodities Act was during the COVID-19 pandemic, mainly to control the supply of essential food items like sugar, wheat, pulses, etc. The government had used Essential Commodities Act during the COVID-19 lockdowns. And now we are seeing a repeat usage of this extraordinary power, all because of the war against Iran. The US Israeli aggression against Iran, which has pushed Iran to retaliate against the neighboring Gulf states for hosting American military bases, and the targeting of energy infrastructure in the region where oil refineries, gas production plants have been targeted, and mainly the blockade of Strait of Hormuz, a critical maritime choke point that carries 20% of world's oil and 30% of world's gas supplies. India, as you know, has a critical dependency on the Hormuz Strait, though India is pretty safe with regard to oil supplies because of the strategic buffer that we have. The same cannot be said about gas supplies. India has a major gap when it comes to gas supplies in the country. When it comes to crude oil and other hydrocarbons related to it, like petrol, diesel, aviation turbine fuel, etc., our oil marketing companies, they have sufficient buffer stocks with them. Plus, India has built a formidable strategic reserve, which gives us a buffer of at least 2 months of supplies. Even without additional imports, India can still try to survive at least the next 40 to 60 days. And if required, we can even push it up to 70, 74 days. So 2.5 months, India is pretty safe with regard to crude oil and related supplies. But the real concern and problem is with gas supplies. See, our domestic gas production meets only 41% of the demand. Daily demand is around 80,000 metric tons, and hardly half of it is domestically produced. So, on an annual basis, our domestic gas production takes care of 40% of the total demand, 40 to 41% approximately, which means we have a near 60% dependency on imports. Import of LPG, liquefied petroleum gas for cooking, and your LNG, the liquefied natural gas, the compressed gas, which is used mainly in transportation and industries. Nearly 60% of this is imported. And out of the total gas imports, 90% of it passes through Hormuz. Since Qatar is the leading supplier, accounting for nearly 35-36% of our total imports, and the route is completely blocked out, then even Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Oman, these Gulf countries, they are the primary gas suppliers to India. Qatar being the leading supplier. 90% of our gas imports is coming through Hormuz Strait. So, with the blockade of Hormuz and Iran targeting some of the commercial ships, the supplies have been disrupted. We barely had a buffer of hardly 1 or 2 days. See, India's storage for gas related products is located only at Mangaluru in Karnataka and Vishakhapatnam or Vizag in Andhra Pradesh. These underground storage facilities, they give us a buffer of hardly 1 or 2 days of supply. They can store around 1.4 million metric tons, right, which will barely meet 2 days of India's demand. That's why India has quickly run out of gas, and domestic production can meet only a part of the demand. So that's why there is a huge gap as imports came to a standstill over the last few days. We were leading basically a ship to mouth existence, a day to day existence in terms of gas. And that is one of the weaknesses, a strategic weakness of India. We hadn't created enough strategic reserves to store sufficient gas reserves. Now, the other problem which is aggravating the challenge here is the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. See, Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana was implemented with a very, very good intention, mainly to push uh, households away from firewood and chullas and traditional form of cooking, which can cause indoor air pollution, affect the health of women, especially who cook in the kitchen, to move towards cleaner source of cooking fuel, which will also help bring down pollution and emissions as well. So this scheme was very, very well implemented by the government of India, achieving nearly 100% LPG coverage in the country. During its implementation, almost 10 crore households were added, taking the total LPG users in the country to 33 crore families. But the problem is the demand increased, the market jumped up, but supply remained the same, and the government never focused on creating a strategic reserve for gas. So, before the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, just around 62% households had LPG connections in their house or piped gas connections in their house. Now it has reached almost 100%, which is a very good implementation of the scheme. But the downside of it was not considered. What happens if there is a sudden supply shock which can halt the gas supplies? Then can the government still supply gas to all the households? Because now that the users were more, the demand was more, and domestic production had never been scaled up to that level. As I said, domestic production can barely take care of 40 to 41%, right? So the lack of strategic reserves and buffer is what is placing India in this situation. That is why, as an emergency measure, the government is invoking Essential Commodities Act, through which the government can now issue specific orders to the industry. It has already directed all the oil marketing companies, even the private petrochemical companies like Reliance, Adani, etc., to prioritize LPG production in the country. So all the available propane and butane in India is now coming under complete direct government control, and it will be used only and only for LPG production, nothing else. Because they are used for other industrial purposes. They are used in petrochemical manufacturing of various petrochemical industrial products. So the production of these petrochemical products will be stopped. It has been stopped immediately. And all the propane and butane available with public sector oil marketing companies and private petrochemical companies is now being diverted only for LPG production. That's why in the last few days, LPG production in India is up by 25%. The domestic LPG production has gone up by 25% because the government is gaining full control, ordering all public private companies to focus only on producing domestic LPG. The government is also diverting propylene, butane, and other elements in the C3, C4 streams of the petrochemical industry towards gas production. So this can boost domestic production by a certain margin, and it will help address the shortage. But there will still be a big gap. At least a 50% gap will still be present because we don't have replacements. We don't have easy alternatives for those imports. So through the Essential Commodities Act, the government is not only controlling production, as you can see here, it is directing the supply, distribution, and allocation as well. The priority has been given to household gas supplies, supplying LPG cylinders to households, supplying piped gas, where houses are connected through a piped connection. This is where 100% of the demand is to be met by the oil marketing companies. So, three companies in particular, Indian Oil Corporation, BPCL, and HPCL, they will play a pivotal role to ensure that all the LPG being produced and all the LNG being produced is first directed towards household consumers at the retail level to supply the piped gas and the gas cylinders that are required for cooking in our kitchens. So this means that the government has deprioritized community kitchens and commercial kitchens. That's why all your hotels across India, they're shutting down, right? If you haven't seen, step out, take a look. Most hotels are not able to cook basic food items. Either they have reduced the menu itself, they're relying only on those food items which they can cook using firewood or maybe induction stove or ovens. But gas-based cooking is almost completely stopped in almost every part of the country, right? So hotel menus are down, and the business will take a massive hit, which will in turn affect the entire food supply chain and the agriculture supply chain. This is already having a cascading effect on several sections of the society, from students and youth who depend on outside food, on PGs, on canteens, messes, senior citizens as well, right? It's having an impact on midday meals scheme program as well. It's impacting patients who depend on food supplied from the outside. So the government has to prioritize for the next few weeks. And hence, the priority right now remains on household supplies, where 100% of the demand is likely to be met. With increase in domestic production and some supplies coming in from the Gulf, the government is confident that it can take care of the household demand for gas. Next, gas demand for transport will also be met 100% because you can't afford your trucks, your vehicles, and taxis to come to a halt, right? So that's as good as going back to the COVID era, like a lockdown of sorts, which will cripple your economy. So gas requirement for transport sector will be met 100%. The Ministry of Petroleum Natural Gas will work with the oil marketing companies and the private manufacturers and suppliers to ensure that the demand here is met. Then the gas required for LPG production. You need propane, butane, etc. to produce LPG. This will be prioritized 100%. Whereas other sectors like fertilizers. See, fertilizers right now, you will not see a sudden high demand. Once the Kharif sowing season begins in another few weeks, that's where we'll see a significant spike in fertilizer demand. But fortunately, India has enough strategic reserves of fertilizers. Government is confident that we can sail through this Kharif season. And for now, the gas allocation is at 70%. 70% of demand from fertilizer industry will be met, meaning there will be some shortage in gas supply for fertilizer manufacturers, but it is unlikely to affect agriculture because we do have enough buffer stocks. But there is an article in today's newspaper. A parliamentary panel on agriculture has pointed out and flagged the concern, because if the demand during the upcoming Kharif sowing season increases, and if we do not have sufficient supplies, there might be a mismatch which will significantly impact Indian farmers as fertilizer prices will shoot up. But for now, government will ensure 70% of the demand from fertilizer industry is met for gas supplies. Then for other industries like tea industry, across manufacturing industry, gas is used, especially natural gas as industrial heat source. So 80% of their demand will be met, 20% will not be met, which means our manufacturing is going to see a slight decline. Maybe it will be a significant decline as well, which will result in significant losses for the industry. So this is going to have a very long lasting cascading effect. And that is the impact of this unnecessary war that Trump and Netanyahu have triggered. Almost every country in the world, every individual in the world is paying the price. And through this extraordinary law, India is trying to manage the situation for now. So please take up this direct question on Essential Commodities Act. You should know what is the purpose, how it can be utilized, and what kind of control the government gains over the supply chain of essential commodities. Now, coming to the next big development, we have plenty of articles related to the Iran war, some key updates. So let's look at the first one. Donald Trump posted on social media that US has carried out massive bombardment of a strategic island the Kharg island of Iran. Now, what is so special about the Kharg island? Where is it located? And what does it mean for the ongoing conflict? That is something we'll try to break down. Now, please look at the map on your screen. The Kharg island is located over here in the Persian Gulf. This is your Hormuz Strait, which is hardly 55 kilometers wide, that links your Persian Gulf with Gulf of Oman. Thus, it's a strategic maritime choke point, right? And towards the northwestern part of Persian Gulf, closer to Iraq, that's where you have the Kharg Island. It's located roughly 25 kilometers from Iran's coastline. Okay, this island is also known as the Pearl of Persian Gulf. It's also sometimes referred to as the Forbidden Island. And geologically speaking, from a geography perspective, the island is essentially a coral structure. It's primarily a coral outcrop located in the Persian Gulf, roughly 25 kilometers from Iran's coastline. So the Pearl of the Persian Gulf, also called the Forbidden Island, it is seen as the economic lifeline of Iran. According to the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, Kharg Island is the economic backbone of Iran's oil economy. This is where 90% of Iran's oil exports goes through. So Iran has set up massive infrastructure, energy infrastructure, oil and gas infrastructure over here, which accounts for nearly 90% of Iran's oil and gas exports. Right, at one point, before 2018, Iran used to be a top oil gas supplier to India as well. There was a time when Iran was the second largest oil supplier to India after Iraq. It was even ahead of Saudi Arabia, right? So it was primarily through this route that India was also sourcing oil gas from Iran before we stopped the procurement after 2018. After US pressurized India to follow the sanctions on Iran, we cut off those supplies. But India has those links with the Kharg Island region because some of the procurement we used to do from Iran used to come from here. Right now, China is the biggest buyer of Iranian oil and gas. So targeting Kharg Island marks a major escalation in this conflict. As of now, Trump has said that US has only targeted military infrastructure on Kharg Island. Reportedly, they have not hit any oil facilities and the energy infrastructure has not been targeted. The refineries, the pipelines, they have not been hit. They have deliberately been excluded by the American Armed Forces and they have taken aim only at the military installations located on the Kharg Island. Now, what will happen if US were to strike the energy infrastructure on Kharg Island? Now, please look at the satellite map here. You can see the entire coral outcrop. You can see the infrastructure related to oil gas production, right? Apart from the oil facilities, there are some military facilities located as well. So there is a strategic runway and a small airport which is operated here with a helipad. There is a jetty for docking boats and ships. So US has primarily targeted these facilities. It has bombarded a helipad. It has taken out the air traffic control, which operates this small runway over here. The jetty facility also has been hit. Then few naval facilities of Iranian Navy, few facilities of IRGC, and some of the air defense structures where missiles were stored, radars were set up. Those sites have been hit. Even Iran's media outlets have confirmed it's only the military targets that have been hit by US. But this is a big escalation because Iran has warned that if US or Israel hit the economic lifeline, if they take aim at the oil energy infrastructure, then Iran will also go after the oil and energy infrastructure across the Gulf region. In the past 2 weeks, Iran has already caused some minor damage to oil gas production facilities from Qatar to Kuwait to Saudi Arabia. But if the war escalates, if Israel or US hit the economic backbone of Iran at Kharg Island by destroying or damaging the oil energy facilities, Iran will also escalate and take a direct and serious aim at the oil energy infrastructure spread across the region. You can see here in this unclassified footage the US released as to how the military sites were chosen and picked out on Kharg Island. So this marks a serious escalation because Iran would probably react very aggressively, even at Hormuz, targeting the ships even further, which could perpetuate the oil and gas crisis the world is already facing. In some good news for India, in the context of the war, it's been reported that a couple of LPG tankers they have managed to successfully and safely pass through Hormuz and they are headed towards India. In another day or two, these two vessels will reach India's coastline. One is coming to Mumbai port, one is going to Kandla, and this will bring fresh LPG supplies to India. Both are carrying LPG as of now, and they can help us meet 1 to 2 days of demand, which will be a big relief since domestic production also has gone up. With two ships bringing LPG, it will be a big relief for India, at least for a couple of days. But however, we had a total of 24 Indian flagged vessels that were stuck in Persian Gulf. So out of that, two have arrived. A couple of them had arrived before this, carrying crude oil. Now we still have 22 vessels carrying an Indian flag which are stuck. Some of them are carrying LPG, some are carrying crude oil, some are carrying few chemical products. So India is working with Iran to try and work out a passage. Though there have been media reports that Iran has given a passage to India, it's still not clear or confirmed from the government of India or the government of Iran that any such passage has been provided. Iran especially has denied giving any such safe passage, but as of now, at least four Indian ships or ships headed towards India have passed through Hormuz. So maybe diplomacy is working and India is able to leverage its remaining influence with Iran to create a safe passage. But we need to wait for more clarity on this. The other concern for us is that on these vessels, we have 600 plus Indian seafarers whose safety and their lives are at risk. That is something that bothers and concerns India. It's not just the ships and the cargo, the precious cargo that they are carrying, even the seafarers on board. There are more than 600 Indian seafarers who are trapped in the Persian Gulf on these vessels headed towards India. So India is trying to work out a passage with Iran. Now, talking about gas supplies, one alternative we have is United States. See, US is the world's largest gas exporter, right? So you can see how this war profits the American industry in many ways. It's not just the American defense and military industrial complex which is profiting from the war because of all the new defense contracts. The American oil gas industry is also massively profiting. US is also a key exporter of shale oil and it's the world's largest gas exporter. Last year, India had struck a deal to procure gas from the US. Now, with Hormuz blocked and options drying up for India, we are looking at procuring gas from US, but only constraint is it will take 2 months, the round trip for a vessel to leave from India to go to US, pick up gas and come back. It will take a minimum of 2 months. So the time and the cost is what becomes a hurdle. But you can also see how the American industry, the oil gas industry and the military defense industrial complex are profiting from this conflict. That is exactly what a US official has said yesterday. There's another article in today's paper where the US Interior Secretary has stated that US can solve the energy problem created by the blockade of Hormuz. That US can supply energy supplies for Asia Pacific region, right? So this again highlights the profit related motive, uh, and it explains how US alone stands to benefit from the escalation which is happening. As global oil prices jump and a bigger shortage gets created in the oil gas market, US can now flood its oil and gas into the world market, creating a huge opportunity for itself, raking in billions of dollars of profits for the American energy companies. So US is saying that they will now supply to the Asia Pacific region. But however, cost and distance and time will be the biggest hurdle for this. Next, as I said, community kitchens have been affected, just like commercial kitchens have been affected because of the gas shortage. Midday meal program across schools is already facing a crunch. Some kitchens have managed to shift to firewood, gobar, and other forms of source for cooking. But Those who depended solely on LPG supplies, they have taken a hit. So this can affect nutrition programs at our schools as well, affecting the nutrition of our children. Now, this is the article that points towards the emerging risks for the fertilizer industry. Because, see, the parliamentary panel, which has flagged these concerns, it has basically urged the government to be more cautious, to plan better, right? The Kharif season is coming up. The demand for fertilizer will shoot up. And India's agriculture, farmers depend heavily on the Kharif season. The government, as of now, is quite confident that we have enough buffer stock. But the problem is not just about gas supply. While gas is critical for fertilizer industry, there are other raw materials that are needed, some of which comes entirely from West Asia. Like, for example, we depend heavily on Jordan for phosphates and few other sources that are critical for fertilizer industry. Jordan is one of the leading suppliers of phosphatic uh, raw materials and fertilizers for India, which is crucial for India's agriculture. So the war in West Asia might have a much bigger cascading effect. If the war expands further, if let's say the Suez Canal Red Sea route also gets blocked, then India will face very, very severe challenges. And that is the risk being flagged by the parliamentary panel, urging the government to plan ahead because we still have time to ensure that adequate fertilizer supply is available for the Kharif sowing season. The aviation industry is facing the full brunt of the war in West Asia. India's private carriers like Indigo and the others, they are facing a fuel shortage. Fuel price has increased almost 3 times. Though aviation turbine fuel is available, there is definitely a crunch and the prices are going up. The prices have increased by nearly 3 times. So this has a significant cost on the airlines industry. Plus the cancelled flights. As the airspace is closed, missiles, drones are flying around in the region. Many airports have been hit from Dubai to Abu Dhabi. It has led to many, many flight cancellations, resulting in significant losses for the carriers because they will have to refund some of the passengers as well. Lakhs of passengers have been stranded on both the sides, significantly impacting trade and business opportunities. So you can't really put a number on the total financial loss that India might be incurring because of the West Asia conflict, as each and every sector is getting disrupted day by day. So, one hope for India, one diplomatic option that we are try and push the countries to resolve the differences and try to de escalate is the BRICS platform. India has put a lot of faith in the BRICS institution. See, right now, India is holding the chair of the BRICS group. For 2026, India is the chair of BRICS, will be hosting the BRICS summit as well. So there is a great opportunity for India as the leader of BRICS to try and convince Iran and the other members which are involved in the conflict, and also use the influence of Russia and China, which are key members of the BRICS grouping, to try and find a way out of this conflict. India is using the BRICS channels through the Sherpas who act as representatives for the BRICS member nations. They are in touch with each other, talking to each other. But problem is, the ones who are fighting the conflict are also part of it. Iran has been recently added as a member. When BRICS was founded in 2009, it only had Brazil, India, and China. Only 4 members were there. In 2010, South Africa was added as the 5th member. But in recent years, new members have joined. Iran and UAE have joined. Egypt and Ethiopia have also joined the BRICS. Then, more recently, Indonesia was also admitted. Though Saudi Arabia has been given membership, it has not yet joined formally. Right? BRICS has given membership to Saudi Arabia, but it has not formally joined the group. Argentina was also invited and given the membership, but Argentina has rejected the membership. But since Iran, UAE, and Saudi are part of the BRICS, though Saudi is not formally part of it, it still has been invited and used to participate as an observer. These countries which are fighting each other right now, they're all part of it. So maybe it's a platform where they can resolve the differences, try to find a way out and de-escalate. Or because of the differences, even BRICS functioning might be affected in the coming months. Maybe the BRICS summit India is planning to host may not even happen if things deteriorate even further, right? So that would be a missed opportunity for India. So, but however, India is still confident that we can work with Russia, China, and use the BRICS platform to try and mediate between Iran and the Gulf countries. This could even raise the profile of BRICS, which is primarily seen by US as an anti-West group, as an anti-US association. And it could even enhance the profile of its leading members like India, Russia, and China as well. Now, coming to another key point, Donald Trump has announced that other countries like China, UK, France, South Korea, and Japan are likely to send their naval ships to Hormuz to protect the shipping lane and to clear the Iranian blockade. But how far is it true? No one knows, because you can't trust blindly what Trump says. He says something today, tomorrow he'll change the statement. Just 3 days ago, he said Iran war is ending. Iran is about to surrender. They've hit all available targets and fresh bombing has resumed. Right? So here, Trump has stated that many foreign countries are sending their warships to clear the Hormuz Strait and keep it open for shipping to protect freedom of navigation. But no confirmation has come from the other countries. China, UK, France, South Korea, Japan, none of them have given any confirmation on this. But Donald Trump has been claiming that these countries are sending a naval task force. Then coming to the current phase of the conflict, Iran yesterday has carried out one big escalation. For the first time, it has struck non-US assets, particularly the Fujairah oil refinery in United Arab Emirates was hit, which marks another escalation from the Iranian side. So the day by day, the war is becoming costlier. And even in Lebanon, the war has expanded and spread as Israel continues to target Hezbollah positions. So the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire, which had been negotiated in 2024, has completely fallen apart. Israel has been accused of targeting even civilian locations in Beirut. Hezbollah is accused of violating the ceasefire, of crossing the Litani River, coming closer to the Israeli border near the blue line, and firing missiles and rockets and drones towards northern parts of Israel, where civilian areas are being hit by Hezbollah. So both sides have escalated the conflict here, resulting in several killings and deaths. So coming to one last interesting point regarding the war, while Hezbollah has been fighting on the side of Iran, and the war in Lebanon has escalated as well, the other Iranian proxy, Hamas, which controls Gaza, which is in many ways responsible for the entire conflict, because it was on October 7th that Hamas carried out the deadly terror attack that triggered all of this, right? Hamas has urged Iran to exercise restraint when it comes to targeting the neighboring Gulf states. While Hamas itself is seen as a radical extremist group targeting Israel and American interests, it has been weakened, almost decimated by Israel as part of the Gaza war over the last 3 to 4 years. But it has urged Iran to show some restraint when it comes to attacking the Gulf neighboring states, as they are seen as allies. So this is again quite interesting because, see, Hamas has always been a proxy, completely sponsored, funded by Iran, armed by Iran and some of its allies like Syria, Lebanon, and others. Now, Hamas is based out of Qatar. The leadership of Hamas is headquartered in Qatar. Hamas leaders have close links across the Gulf region with other Gulf states and monarchies. Maybe it's because of that they're urging Iran to show some restraint, though they support Iran's attacks on Israel and US, right? They themselves have not been able to play a role in the conflict as they have been weakened and almost decimated. But they've urged Iran to show some restraint when it comes to attacking the Gulf neighboring states. With this, we complete all the basic updates on the Iran war. Now let's come to the prelim section, a quick look at the small articles. India's ISRO has suffered another major setback. See, India is building its own constellation of satellites under NavIC, also known as Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System, IRNSS, as a regional version of GPS. When you look at countries like United States, right, US has a global positioning system, which is a constellation of 30 to 36 satellites providing real-time navigational, positional, and timing services, which has civilian and military application. It is used for commercial navigation, from flights to ships to even your cars, etc. Right? The same positioning system, it is used by missiles and fighter jets to navigate to by submarines and naval vessels as well. So the GPS of the US, which is a formidable constellation of satellites, which has nearly 36 satellites in orbit, provides for very accurate positional information serving a civilian and military application. Similarly, Russia has its own version of GPS. Since this is a strategic asset, right? Big powers like to have their own constellation of satellites. They can't depend on a foreign supplier or vendor. Russia has its own version of GPS known as the GLONASS. The European countries have their own version of GPS called the Galileo. Even China has a global positioning system of its own called the Beidou. So, India, on its part, has tried to build a regional constellation. Since it's going to be very expensive and difficult to maintain a global constellation, as you need 36 satellites in orbit, ISRO came out with a smaller version of GPS, a miniature version of sorts, that will provide a coverage of 1,500 kilometers around India and deliver precision, accurate timing, positional, and navigational information. For this, we need barely around 7 to 8 satellites as part of the constellation, right? So that is your NavIC program, Navigation Through Indian Constellation, or IRNSS. So till date, 9 satellite launches have been attempted by ISRO. One of them completely failed to reach the orbit. And amongst the others, repeated issues have come up, particularly with the atomic clocks that are used on board. See, atomic clocks are very critical. They maintain very precise time to fraction of a second, and they are critical in timing services, positional and navigational services. Satellites rely on such atomic clocks to maintain precise timing to ensure complete synchronization. But the atomic clocks ISRO had used, it was from a Swiss manufacturer that we had procured from Switzerland. And these atomic clocks are failing one after the other. As of now, we had only 4 satellites in this constellation active and working. The remaining 4 had become defunct because of various technical issues they faced. One of them did not reach the orbit. The launch itself was a failure. And in rest of the 4, many other issues came up, including clock related issues. So we had at least 4 functioning, and the government had recently informed that minimum 4 satellites are enough to keep NavIC operational. NavIC could remain operational even with minimum of 4 satellites. But to add to the tragedy, one of the satellites has lost the functionality of its atomic clock, which leaves India with only 3 NavIC satellites in orbit. Only 3 of them remain operational and functional, even they are reaching the end of their mission life. So this has raised very serious concerns about the very survival of this project. In fact, on the satellite where the atomic clock has failed, it had already crossed its mission life. It was supposed to be active till 2026, and by then the atomic clock has failed. Though it will continue to provide basic broadcast services, it can't be used for positional navigational services, which is what is critical, right? So India was trying to push the entire transport industry and other industries to rely on Indian version of GPS, that is NavIC, to reduce dependency on American GPS. India was looking at gaining strategic autonomy here because during Kargil war, reportedly US turned off access to GPS satellites, which crippled India's targeted precision munition. So NavIC was seen as an answer to this. That's why the range kept limited to 1,500 kilometers, so that even if commercial services rely on foreign vendors For strategic military purposes, we could rely on India's own GPS, that is the NavIC. Now, with just 3 satellites remaining functional, it will be a very, very big challenge to revive this project as of now. ISRO is planning multiple launches this year. It's hoping to place 3 more satellites in orbit. But as I said, it has brought up serious questions about the survivability of this program. Coming to the next topic, JSW Steel, a major steel mining and manufacturing company from India, has acquired and started a critical coking coal mine project in Mozambique. See, coking coal is a critical ingredient in steel manufacturing, right? And as you know, steel is vital for industrial development, for infrastructure development. But unfortunately, India doesn't have enough domestic coking coal production. So it becomes a strategic resource for India as we are import dependent to some extent. So an Indian company gaining a major mine in a nearby country and setting up a production line and supply chain is going to be of great economic and strategic significance. So in the country of Mozambique, which is in East Africa, you have this coal mine, the Moatis coal mine, one of the major coal deposits in the African continent. So JSW has started the mining project, and from here it will source coking coal for its steel factories in India. It will make use of 2 strategic ports in Mozambique. The Beira port, located over here, facing the western part of Indian Ocean, and the Nacala port, located over here, right next to Madagascar. This is your Mozambique channel, which is again a strategic uh, channel and a choke point. So from here, the vessels can supply the coking coal to India's steel industries. But also note, China has made big investments in the Beira port under its Belt and Road Initiative. Coming to the next topic, there is an article under the Science and Tech section focusing on the vaccination of bats. Some of you might be surprised, like how can bats be vaccinated? Why should they be vaccinated? See, bats are considered as the reservoir of all types of pathogens, especially some deadly and even novel viruses. Bats play host and act as a reservoir, sometimes a carrier of various deadly pathogens, particularly harmful viruses, from rabies to Nipah to even corona. So different varieties of viruses are hosted by bats. They are the primary source for various deadly diseases. And there is always a fear of a zoonotic jump happening to humans, right? Humans getting infected is what could trigger the next big epidemic outbreak. It's widely believed many diseases from Nipah to even COVID has a origin which traces back to bats. So vaccinating them is of great importance to step up their immunity, to prevent the spread of these deadly pathogens and create herd immunity amongst the bats. But how will you vaccinate the bats? You can't physically catch hold of each and every bat and vaccinate them. It's impossible, right? It's impractical as well. So scientists and researchers are coming out with new ecological ways to vaccinate bats. One method is to irradiate mosquitoes, which in turn are eaten by bats or they get bitten by these mosquitoes, transferring that immunity accorded through the irradiation technique. So this has proven quite successful in laboratory setting and even in a simulated setting. This method of vaccinating bats has proven quite efficient, where irradiated mosquitoes are eaten up by those bats or they get bitten by these mosquitoes, resulting in improved immunity, causing vaccination in a way. Then another technique is that bats have a preference to drink salt water, saline water. So researchers have mixed water with basically the vaccine material and substance in a saline solution and making it available for those bats wherever bat communities are found. So when bats drink that saline salt water, which they like, which they prefer, they will ingest the vaccine as well. The water is laced with that, and research has shown that it does improve their immunity against some of these pathogens, including rabies and Nipah. So this is something you need to note down. Coming to the last article for today. Across West Asia, yesterday, which was the last Friday before the festival of Ramzan, across West Asia, people, especially in the Shia community, have celebrated the day as Al-Quds Day. The Al-Quds Day, it has more of a geopolitical significance than religious spiritual significance. This day was marked by Iran in 1979 following the Iranian Revolution. After the Shia clerics took over the country and Iran came under the leadership of the supreme leader, Ayatollah. Since then, Iran has designated the last Friday before Ramzan as the Al-Quds Day. It's a reference to Jerusalem. It's a reference to the occupation of Palestinian land and Jerusalem by Israel. So this is a day which is marked by Shia community and others, those who are aligned with Iran, to show solidarity with Palestinians and highlight the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. So that is the relevance of Al-Quds Day, which was marked in countries like Iran, Iraq, and other parts of the world, primarily by the Shia community, which remains loyal to the Iranian Shia theocracy. So it's a day to show solidarity with Palestinians whose land has been occupied by Israel. Clear? So on this note, we bring the session to an end. If you like the session, understood all the topics, please press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to share this video with other aspirants. That's it. Thanks for watching. Take care.